Hey everyone, good to see you again at the virtual WaterCooler, and good to see our guest again. Nothing Mike I love more than a repeat guest, and we've got the fabulous Dr. Therese Huston here to talk about, or talk more about, Let's Talk. Awesome book that if you haven't picked it up already, if you haven't listened to our first interview, go find it on my YouTube channel. We're talking feedback and why you should make feedback your superpower. For folks who missed the first one, Dr. Huston, and I'm only going to call you Dr. Huston twice. That's it.
That's it. Jump right to Therese. It's good.
Therese, we're going right to Therese. Therese, why should effective feedback be someone's superpower?
I don't know about you, but feedback moments have been some of the most memorable moments for me at work, whether it's good feedback or bad feedback. When it's great feedback, you treasure that moment and you etch it in memory. And when it's bad feedback, you're crushed, maybe you're blindsided. These are moments that all of us remember. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed that they can remember a key moment when they were 22 and they got that feedback from their boss that they felt blindsided by. None of us want to be blindsided by feedback. And so if you can make feedback your superpower, whether you're a manager or you're just giving feedback to a peer, you are going to be one of everyone's favorite persons at work. So let's all make feedback our superpower.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Love it. Yeah. And you want to be able to deliver this stuff effectively so you don't crush someone's ego unnecessarily or crush their dreams unnecessarily. But also, too, you don't want to sit there and fester that someone isn't performing at the level they should be, but got to let them know so that doesn't fester and cause team problems and all the rest of it.
Exactly. And all of us want that kind of coworker. If you have the coworker who can come up to you and say, Kelly, I know you're working so hard. This is getting in your way. Oh my goodness. You want to huddle with that person. You want to keep them as your buddy, right? That's the kind of coworker we all want.
That's absolutely. Love this. Love this. Okay. So let's jump into some questions that I want to say the hangovers. the hangovers from our last conversation, our first conversation. This was a question from Netta, and it was, what do you recommend for employees wanting to give feedback to their manager? Ooh, there's a fun power dynamic up the chain, which can often feel daunting due to the power differential. Yes, it can feel. Because sometimes we got to give feedback to a manager because we want our manager to succeed, or we want to let their manager know that, hey, how you're dealing with so-and-so is, our peer or colleague. You don't want just to say to the peer, hey,
yes,
about the manager, but what do we do in that situation?
It's tricky. You're so right. And I'm glad Netta raised this question because giving feedback up is a situation we've all been in, and many of us will just avoid it or try to pick the right moment, right? So first of all, there is something smart about picking the right moment. You want to gauge, do you have a good relationship with your supervisor right now? And if it's kind of rocky, maybe wait on it. A good way to test the waters is to give your manager positive feedback and see how they respond to that. Right? So if you say to your manager, something like, this morning's presentation, that was one of the best this team has ever had. And your manager's like, what do you mean? maybe it's not a good day to give critical feedback to your manager, right? If even the positive feedback gets bounced back at you and flung back in a nasty way, maybe that's not the right day. So you can kind of test the waters with positive feedback. That's always a good strategy. And then a couple of good strategies for giving the feedback itself. First of all, Kelly, if you can get your manager to give you permission to give you feedback, that is brilliant. So let's say you're starting a new project and you can say to your manager, I think I might have a unique perspective on this given my work on X. If I have any feedback, would you be interested in it? I can guarantee your manager is going to say, oh, absolutely, Kelly, please give me that. I would love that. That would be so helpful. And then when you bring it up, you can say, oh, you remember how you invited me to give you feedback? And now it's so much easier, right, to have that conversation. So if you're starting a new project, ask for permission. That's a great strategy. Always a good strategy in giving feedback is to state your good intentions. You can say something like, I see the hard work that you're doing, and I want to help you be as productive with the team as possible. Or I see you working to improve the team dynamics, and I have an insight that might be helpful. So state your good intentions and frame it around your good intentions for your manager. Focus on a positive behavior if you can. So if you have seen your manager do the behavior you want them to do more often, refer to it. It's always easier for us to hear feedback when we're also hearing, but you've already done this. So let's say you want your manager to praise your work more. You feel like your manager's being super critical of you, right? And they're not praising you enough. So what you could say is something like, okay, so Daniel, I noticed that you really were praising Angie's work this morning, and I love that. And I'm wondering if you could do that a little bit more often for me. And then Daniel might be like, oh my gosh, do I not praise your work? And you could say, well, you do sometimes, but I just, I'd love it if you could do it more, if you could tell me where I'm having a real impact. And then Daniel's much more open to hearing it because he's doing it for someone else. And you're not saying you're being unfair. Avoid unfair. That triggers real negative things for people. But if you can point to you're doing it already, then it's much easier for a manager to hear that. And my last piece of good advice is to ask about your boss's goals. So if you know that, let's say, if you know your boss's goals, you can hang your feedback on that. So let's say your boss is concerned because you're behind on a project. And you know that that's a huge priority for your boss. You could say something like, I know you're trying to increase productivity on the team. I might have a suggestion. Would you like to hear it? And then your boss will be like, oh my gosh, anything to improve productivity, right? So hang it on your boss's goals. So those are a couple of things. State your good intentions, focus on the positive behavior and ask for it more often, and then figure out what your boss's goals are and hang the feedback on top of that.
That's awesome. Is there just a question I have is any time that you sort of like, I've observed my boss doesn't, and I know that his boss has talked or her boss has talked to her. Is there any time where you kind of leapfrog over and get advice from someone else, like further up the food chain?
Oh, you mean so like go talk to your supervisor? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
You can definitely do that. Depending on how if your manager is really hierarchical, it can bite you in the butt, right?
Yep.
Your manager can be like, hey, what are you doing? Right?
And you're like, because you're like that. That's why I had to go.
That's why I had to do this. Exactly. Because you're like that. Exactly. When is it a good idea? So if you already have existing meetings with your skip level, if you already have existing meetings with your manager's manager, then that's appropriate. If you've never had one of those meetings, definitely don't make that your first conversation, right? Because then that really feels to that supervisor that they're in a lot of trouble, right? So definitely don't make it a first-time conversation. But if you already have those existing conversations, and some people do, I've worked with teams where they already have those conversations, and then it's okay to build that in.
Okay, good. So there's good reason let's pull in a little networking. That's a good reason to network with everyone so that you're not having to race off to HR,
Yes.
because the team dynamic has spiraled into something hideous when it could have been dealt with through relationships and conversations at an earlier point. All right. Well, I sort of feel like the Dear Abby right now of saying,
oh, that's nice. Yeah.
All right, Therese, let's go to the next question.
Next question.
Exactly. Okay, so let's go back to, because we gave that example from your book on, the too much gold, and, feedback on personal matters that have nothing to do with work product and performance, and everything to do with professional perception. And you and I had been talking before, and I had sort of raised the mention of General Motors. And when Mary Barra took over as CEO, they used to have like the dress code policy that was, here, let's have, a 16 volume set of the dress code. And she eliminated it to 2 words: dress appropriately.
Yes.
And when managers flipped out about this, they're like, what does this mean? She's like, well, have a conversation with your people, what it means, right? So how can we have those professional conversations around how we look, or maybe how we answer the phone, or what our, signature line is. Like how can we have those to kind of indicate to people that, what, they may want to pivot, they may want to evolve how they're presenting themselves, because that may be the thing, that perception may be the thing that's holding them back.
And Mary Barra's, it's a really interesting example, because you're right, she replaced a 10-page dress code with a 2-word dress code and encouraged the conversations, right? Because it's going to be different if you're on the factory room floor as to what dress appropriately means versus if you're someone who meets with government officials and are doing government contracts. Very different dress code, right? So obviously it's going to vary depending on the individual and the manager, and needs to have that conversation. So if you, let's say you need to give someone feedback, and I was just consulting with a manager who has an employee who wears short shorts every day. She's right out of college and she wears short shorts, and it's not appropriate, right? So how do you have that conversation? Because that can be hard, right? It's a male manager also giving feedback to a woman, right? And about clothing, really hard, really. And the temptation is just to ask HR to put up a new policy, no short shorts, right?
And then you end up with a dress code that's, 50 pages long, and exactly. Instead of 2 words. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. All right. So I'm going to give you a 6-step approach to addressing, issues that you think, particularly when they're personal issues or hygiene issues. Maybe someone has an odor, right? Or they like the short issue, which I'm guessing other managers who have 20-somethings might be encountering. All right. So 6 steps. So step number 1. Well, I guess even before step number 1, you need to make this private, right? This is not something you bring up in a team meeting, right? You don't bring up the short conversation when other people are around. So even before that.
So like, hey kids, this is a version of Twister. Come on into the conference room. We got a 6-step program. No. Okay. So don't do that. Okay.
Don't do that. No, don't do that. Don't make it a side comment in the cafeteria, right? Make it either a one-on-one Zoom call, or if you're back in the office, one-on-one into, private conference room, or, pull somebody aside. Okay. So make it a private conversation. But step number 1, acknowledge that it's awkward, right? And you can just say like, hey, this is a little bit awkward for you and for me, but that helps the person brace themselves just a little bit. Acknowledge that it's awkward. Step number 2, state your good intentions. All right. So again, I want you to hear, and that might be like this. It might be, Jessica, I want you to hear this from me, not from someone else, because I really care about the good work that you're doing. Right. So state your good intentions. Number 3, state your observation and make it as succinct as possible. So that might be, I notice you wear short shorts often to the office, right? I notice you often wear short shorts. Okay. Don't say other people are telling me that other people are upset by, don't make it about other people, because then he or she will feel really ganged up upon. Just make it your observation. I've noticed that I noticed you have an odor. Okay. And from there, then you move to, step number 4, what's the impact? I'm concerned that people aren't going to take you seriously because of the short shorts, or I'm concerned that our customers are going to be distracted and they're not going to be paying attention to how brilliant you are, right? And the same would apply for an odor, right? You could say, I'm concerned people won't want to work with you, or I'm concerned that customers or clients are going to be distracted and not thinking about the great service that you offer. And then shut up. Step number 5 is to shut up and simply say, what are your thoughts, right? And you're going to be tempted. This is the hardest part of this. You're going to be tempted to just keep talking and explaining and like, I wouldn't say this unless, right? Just say you've stated your good intention. You've stated your observation. Now move to, what are your thoughts? And this gives the other person a chance to say, oh my gosh, like I hadn't thought about this. I just wear what I wore for my summer jobs. I never thought, that this was a problem. It's still hot out, whatever it might be. They've got their reasons, right? Or they're telling you like, I'm on an all cauliflower diet and I guess I'm gassier than I used to be, whatever, right? I don't have time to take a shower before I get into the office, whatever. But they get a chance to explain. And then, 2 of you can now problem solve, like, okay, short shorts are okay on days when you don't see any clients, but otherwise, right? And you might, and you've acknowledged that this is awkward, so you're both sitting in this. And then step number 6 is just thank them. Thank them for having this conversation, right? You're not thanking them for wearing short shorts, right? But you're thanking them for this was hard. Thanks for having this conversation with me. I know it wasn't easy. And that person will walk away feeling so much better. Now they might want to come back and talk with you about it again. They might come back and be like, hey, I've noticed that in marketing, so-and-so and so-and-so also wears short shorts. Are you sure this is a problem, right? And you're like, yeah, but you have the client facing, whatever it might be, right? So don't think that the conversation is necessarily over. They might want to come back to it. But if you follow those 6 steps, state that it's awkward, state your good intentions, state your observation, don't blame it on other people. What's the impact? What are your thoughts? And come back around and thank them. And you're going to have this, and the conversation will be shorter and much less awkward than you expect.
It's more the dread, the lead up to it.
Yes.
It's like one of those things, I would say like a zit before a date. You just want this to go away on its own.
Oh, that's perfect. That is a great analogy. It really is like that. You just want it to be, over.
You didn't want it there in the first place, and you want it over.
And you want it over, and you don't want other people to be thinking more about it than you are, right? You just want to not be noticed. It is. It's a tricky thing, but if you can do that in a way that shows respect, and that's a big issue, especially for Gen Z. Gen Z really wants to be treated with respect. The data is showing, obviously we all want to be treated with respect, right?
Right.
I'm in my early 50s. I want to be treated with respect, but Gen Z is especially sensitive to this. And so particularly if you're giving feedback to your younger employees, if you follow the formula that I just gave you, they're going to feel respected and appreciative.
I know from reading your book that, having overly scripted feedback is something that you're like, go sit there and read a script. But this sounds to me like something like, a manager kind of putting down the 6 steps, or even, the first 4, and writing the sentence and thinking about it before they go in. Don't go in with a script, like something printed out, but
right. Yeah, don't
reading the script, but actually having thought about it in advance, saying, like practice in front of the mirror. I want to acknowledge this is awkward.
Yes, right. That's a great call. Yes. And in fact, if you can do it with a friend first, you will find that it's because part of it is that it feels so awkward in your mouth, right? And once you've even said it to another human being, even if that's not the person that needs to hear it, that other person will be like, wow, Kelly, that was good. And you're like, really? Oh, yeah, that's good news. But yeah, getting over it's not stage fright, but getting over those nerves. You're still going to be anxious going into the conversation, but a lot of that anxiety is beforehand. And once you're in the conversation, and you're right, I'm not a big fan of scripts, but this is one of those cases that if you don't script it out, you're probably just going to keep avoiding the conversation. That's my experience.
Yeah, or I was going to say, or you're going to talk too much and blow the 3 steps.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna, and a really easy thing to do is to say, well, other people are complaining about it, and that makes the other person feel like they're the subject of rumors. It's going to make them feel worse. Yeah, no, just make it my observation. You feel like you feel like by having the support of other people, it's going to be easier on you, but you're making it harder on the recipient.
Yeah. I've seen this. I've observed this. Like, I care about you, and I want to. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. You as soon as you said that, you care about me. I'm like, oh, Kelly, what do you have to tell me?
It's not good.
It's not
good. Save those shorty shorts for the Zoom calls.
There you go. Exactly.
Don't step off your chair when you're on the Zoom call. The shorty shorts. Okay. I'm just having a moment from, back when I worked in an office, and they'd have those, those summer retreats for, the away, like the day at the golf course from Rare, and, the activities were golf or tennis or lying by the pool. And people would say, Kelly, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not golfing, I'm not playing tennis, and I'm not lying by the pool. So thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for asking. I'll show up, I'll have my book, or I'll show up at dinner. It says I'm not sitting around half naked with people from work, but thanks for asking.
Good job. Very smart. You got to draw a line. You got to draw the line. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Okay, on that one we could go on for hours. Okay, but let's go back to other people's questions. And you've touched on Gen Z, so this is really good. So what's your guidance for delivering feedback to Gen Z and who are, new to the workforce? They might have been, hired, during this terrible economic uncertainty, or they've been hired now and they've graduated a year ago and they've gone through this uncertainty. They've likely been hired through a remote process. They may have been working remotely, and for the last whatever time period, they may or may not be getting back into the office. You're a manager of this generation who's got its unique attributes, plus they have this unique start to their career. If I was a manager and I came to you and said, I got a whole bunch of Gen Z, I've hired them in the last 12 months, they've all been working remotely, they were hired remotely, I have to give them feedback. Blah, blah, blah. What do I do?
Help.
Here's the red phone. I want the emergency phone.
Exactly. I'm dreading this. I don't know what to do, where to start. Right. Okay. So there are all these unique obstacles that they are facing because of the time that they were hired, the time that they were graduated, if this is their first job. So not only is it their first job, but they've had all this uncertainty. There are also some characteristics of Gen Z that are important to know about. We've already mentioned that they're especially sensitive to disrespect. Another one that's helpful to know is that the research indicates that both for millennials and for Gen Z, so millennials slightly older, up into their early 30s, and Gen Z, that they're really focused on their own professional development. So they're very, and there's some surveys that indicate they care more about their professional development than they do about bonuses and benefits and, pay. So that can be helpful to you if you're a manager, because if you can be focused on someone's career development, if you can say, okay, all right, so, Alyssa, I want to take one meeting a month to spend 20 minutes, maybe the last Thursday of every month we spend on your professional development, on your career development. And I know that might be asking a lot, 1 20-minute meeting a month, but just build it into your one-on-ones. First of all, Alyssa is going to be so grateful that you're investing in her career development. But it's also going to be easier now for you to give critical feedback, because if you find out like one of Alyssa's goals is to work with higher profile clients, you can be like, okay, so before you work with higher profile clients, there are 4 things I need you to master. Okay, let's start with, we'll work through these over time, but let's start with the first one. The first thing I need you to master is X. And right now you're doing this well, but you really need to work on these parts over here to show that kind of mastery. And you've hung this now on top of one of Alyssa's professional goals. She's going to be grateful for that. Plus you've planted the seed. We're going to do this at least once a month, right? And that's really helpful, because now when you give that feedback, it doesn't come as a surprise to Alyssa. In fact, she might be looking forward to it. Like, okay, we're having that conversation.
If you're doing it monthly, it feels it's less high stakes than a performance review at the end of the year, which is tied to money or bonus, or whether or not you have your contract renewed, or whether you have a job next year. It's not, you're not put on probation. It's all of a sudden it's anyway, keep going. I'm like,
right. If you promise it once a month, you also don't have to be thinking like, when do I bring this up? Like, oh, we've got that conversation next week. That's going to be a good time to bring it up. And you're not sitting on it for 12 months, like you're saying, for the performance review time, when all of a sudden Alyssa's like, why didn't you tell me? Like, you could have told me, I would have changed, So anyway, so knowing that they're very invested in their own professional development, you can use that to provide a vehicle for giving feedback under that framework of like, I want to give you regular career coaching. Let's do this. Also, praise people more often. I know a lot of people are using Slack and various forums for giving more praise, but Gen Z and millennials are especially hungry for praise, and they don't just want to be told like, hey, you showed up for today's meeting. That's not, they want it to be really specific. So, and we all do, but Gen Z and millennials are especially hungry to hear, I was impressed with the data that you showed in this morning's meeting, and here's why it was important. Here's why we need more people presenting data like that. And then the person who's presented that data, Joshua's like, okay, great. Well, now I know how to present data. So giving really specific praise is going to go a long way. And those would be my two big tips for, you want to reduce uncertainty, as you pointed out. And one of the ways to reduce uncertainty is by saying, let's have those conversations once a month, or let's structure this. How would you like to structure it? I want to make sure you get the feedback you need to grow. What would you propose? And this someone's new to the workforce, they're like, I don't know, what do you suggest? And you're like, how about once a month, right? So give that person some control, but you can reduce their uncertainty by giving them that feedback regularly.
I love that. And I'm thinking of a situation with a director that I reported to, where he really, when he came in as the new director, he really laid out the way he operated. And that was so helpful, because that kind of uncertainty, that anxiety, whether it was around the structure of the department, what and how we could do as adding more staff, or, getting raises or promotions, but also how in the ways he gave feedback.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And it was really enlightening. It's like I said, it took a lot of sort of anxiety and stuff out. It took a lot to get used to too, because when you never had someone who had sort of given, maybe it was just years of poorly delivered feedback. That's a better way of putting it. Poorly delivered feedback, to actually have someone who had this clarity, and to know that you could go in and talk about issues and get feedback on issues.
Yes.
That wasn't, it was just really, but it takes a while. I think people get so ingrained in the workforce of what way things operate, that when you say, here's how I operate, here's what you should come to me and we should talk about. It takes a while for people who have been sort of, had to deal with the poorly delivered feedback, or managers that they can't talk to about things like wanting to change jobs or whatever, like trying to reprogram people. So, maybe this is my thing to managers right now. You've got a great opportunity to get this right.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of a story I heard from a manager. It sounds like your manager just said this verbally. Did he say this verbally to you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've met one manager, and what he does is he has his team put together a document. What are the things you need to know about Brian? So the manager's name is Brian. What are the things that are unique about working with Brian? The pros and the cons. And he has his team make up this document. So whenever a new person joins the team, they get this document about what's unique about working with Brian, the pros and the cons. And this could be a great tool for any new employee, but especially employees being hired under this time of uncertainty where you haven't even met the person, right? Everything's been virtual. You hired them virtually. Their first 12 months were virtual. To have the Brian document, right, could be such a relief, because first of all, it shows that Brian is super open to feedback. He was willing to ask people to create this document, right? It's Brian approved. But secondly, it also provides exactly what you're describing, Kelly, of oh my goodness, okay, this is how to work with this person. This is great. This is a guide that all of us need. And it's something, the next time I have new employees, it's one of the things that I want to do for them, is provide what's it like to work with Therese document, but I don't write it, but I have my team write it, right? I think it's brilliant.
Oh, I think that's fantastic, because also too, when it gives Brian the permission, right? The Brian document, say, here's how I am, and this is the relationship I have with my team. Now you have a document and permission to talk to your peers and seek advice and guidance from them. And maybe the Brian document opens the dialogue that way. But also, if, the leadership example from the top, if the leader is willing to expose themselves this way and say, this is how I operate, and this is the way, feedback, or, whatever gets put in the Brian document, the employees kind of got to be like, oh, gee, I got to be prepared for this as well. So yeah,
it's brilliant. And one last tip on Gen Z. I know a lot of people will push back on the praise thing. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of giving praise to millennials. I've also got to praise Gen Z. Think about it this way. When you're young, you don't know what you're good at, right? of any age, when you were young, if you're, whatever age you are now, when you were young, you weren't sure what you were good at. And so for someone to take the time to say, Kelly, here's the thing that's unique about you, that's huge. It would be such a gift. So regardless of what generation someone belongs to, when you're young, you don't know what you're good at yet. So that's a way you could become one of someone's favorite boss, is by letting them know, here's the thing that's unique about you.
Yeah, the boss I told you about, he told me what was unique about me, and I told him he was an idiot. Okay, so anyway. and then I wrote my book, Build Your Dream Network, and I had to eat crow to tell him he was right a decade earlier. But anyhow,
yeah.
Moving along. All right, we got one more question for today. Any suggestions on ways to deliver feedback over Zoom or a phone call? Thinking, we've had, because of the world situation we're in right now, delays in people coming back into offices and all of that. And it may be that people need to deliver these performance reviews in the little square, or any guidance on how they should set that up for some level of success, when it would be so much better to be doing it, 6 feet apart in the same physical space.
So I think the number one thing to realize when it comes to giving feedback remotely is to realize that what's the larger world we're living in. Most of us are under more stress. Maybe it's because, you're working from home and you've also got kids at home and you're having to now juggle that. Or it could be that you're just stressed about COVID. The Delta variant is happening right now, right? There could be a lot of people are reporting much higher stress levels than they did 2 years ago, back in 2019. And the reason that I bring that up is because what social scientists have found is that when you're more stressed, you tend to hear news with a negativity bias. We all tend to have a negativity bias. We tend to remember the criticism more than we remember the praise, right? You're kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and we remember the criticism more than we remember the praise. But that negativity bias is especially high when people are stressed, right?
So it's like the little lizard brain turns into like a Komodo dragon lizard brain.
Well, right. Yeah, it's a great analogy. We have an even more negative lens. We don't have rose-colored we don't have rosy glasses on right now, and so that's, on the one hand, you've got to probably have managers right now thinking, oh my gosh, Therese, I can't say anything negative. I'm not saying don't say anything negative. You just have to add a little bit more language to make sure that the other person hears it appropriately. So if you're telling Molly she needs to redo a report, you want to say, okay, so Molly, what I'm saying is you need to redo that 3-page report. What I'm not saying is that you don't know how to write a report. I'm not saying that you've got bad data, and I'm certainly not saying you don't belong here, okay? So you're comparing, contrasting. You're letting Molly know it only means that report needs to be redone because, and you can explain, maybe a VP is finally paying attention to our reports or something like that, right? Or this report's especially important because it affects our budget numbers for next year. So we need to really get this one watertight. But do the compare and contrast. Let Molly know why the work needs to come up a level, but also let her know it doesn't mean X and Y and Z. It doesn't mean you don't belong. It doesn't mean that you write bad reports, right? Just this one report, we need to get it even better than usual. So that's one piece of advice I would offer. The other piece of advice I would offer is to start by asking questions. So if you need to give someone critical feedback, this is always a good practice. I talk about it in my book, Let's Talk. But even more important now to say, so Molly, what did you think of that report? How did that go for you? Because now Molly might get a chance. When people are getting feedback, they want a chance to tell their side of the story. So Molly gets to tell you, oh my gosh, it started out as a 12-page report. It took me like several late nights to get it down to 3 pages. Okay, that was really hard for me. And you can be like, yeah, I can see some places where it seemed like you had more to tell, right? And I can tell that there was a bigger story behind this. So I want to work with you to figure out how do we get the right, because I think there was some other data you might have included that was even better than the data you chose, right? But if you can ask the question, how did that go for you? What was the experience like? You can then build your feedback off of Molly's comments. So that's going to make it more of a conversation.
Right, and you might pinpoint what the real problem is. Like Molly didn't write a bad report. Maybe the other department she had to get information from, they screwed up again. And if she wasn't homeschooling the kids and had this crisis, she could have chased them more, but she couldn't chase them more. And now you've revealed what the real problem is. So you can say, all right, now we can give you feedback on this. You should have talked about this problem before, or you should have let me know that this person wasn't delivering to you in time, or you know what? Now in the future, because I can see there was, as you point out, your example, like there was more data that we could have brought in and the story was incomplete. So next time when you hit that, let's have an interim meeting before the report so we can brainstorm which data should be in here, like whatever it may be.
Right. But then you can get, like you're getting, right now you just got into all kinds of coaching. Like, let me, if you're having trouble getting the data, let me intervene. I know somebody in marketing, I can get you that data faster, or whatever it might be, right? But you can now brainstorm how Molly can handle the same situation differently in the future, so that next time she's like, now I aced that report. Yay. My hard work paid off. Right. Yeah. Brilliant.
Which is what feedback in I hate it that feedback in the sense of performance. It's like people hear feedback, they think performance reviews, they think promotion. Do I have a job? Am I going to get a raise? Rather than feedback as doing your job better and your skills advancing and your skills getting lifted up and having more fulfillment at work.
Yeah, well said, Kelly. And don't all of us want that for the people on the team? We want that for ourselves. We want everybody's work to be better 6 months from now than it is today, right? That would make
X. I want that.
Exactly. I want that. I want my work to just keep improving. And that would make your job as a manager easier if everybody's work keeps going up, right? You can delegate more or give them harder challenges. That would be great. So yeah, think about feedback as the opportunity for everyone to improve and grow. And now all of a sudden it makes it an easier conversation.
This is awesome. This has been amazing. So for everybody, if you have not, listen, we're getting into that season. We're getting into feedback season. For those of you who wait once a year to do this stuff, get this book now. Get this book now. Lift up your management skills, improve your team, Let's Talk. It is a wonderful read. And I'm just saying that because I love you and I love nonfiction books, and we're both Penguin Roundhouse authors. Not because of that. I like a good nonfiction read, but this is like really great illustrated stories that illustrate the points, actionable. Thank you for this is a real gift for managers, and they should all get it. You've written other books, and I'm going to want to talk about those, but at some point with you. So this is you'll come back, won't you?
I will come back. You're right. I love being on your show. It's such a treat. So I will come back, Hoey. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. And if I get any other questions on feedback, I'll be calling you back on that too. So this has been amazing. Thank you, Dr. Huston. Oops, I did it 3 times. Therese, where can people find you other than here on the virtual water cooler?
You can find me on my website, ThereseHuston.com, or look me up on LinkedIn, just Therese Huston, and you'll find me.
Fantastic. All right. Stay well. Always good to see you. And thanks, everyone, for joining us at the water cooler.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.